Hey listeners, and welcome back to Undetected. Thanks for all your feedback and comments you gave us over Twitter at Detectify, and also via email undetected@detectify.com. This time I am here with Fredrik Almroth, and we are going to discuss one of the buzzwords of this decade, or the upcoming decade, which is bug bounties. And bug bounties are just one facet of crowdsourced security, but it's a trend that we can't really ignore these days, and a lot of companies are taking part of it. But what are bug bounties, as in what are they useful for, and what are they not that useful for? We're going to talk about all this with Fredrik today. This podcast is brought to you by Detectify. I'd like to share some details I found about you while stalking you online, or your online presence. So it seems like you've been on board with crowdsourced security for quite some time, and I found out that you were registered in HackerOne already back in 2013. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, and you're also one of the founding fathers of Detectify. I was checking your public HackerOne profile, and it seems like you have quite a bit of submitted findings in there as well.
Yeah, that checks out.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
That's good. So, but I think most interestingly, you have in the past, you found findings or vulnerabilities in Tesla's website and in Google. But let's get back to that in a second. But first, I would like you to tell me, why are you here today?
Why am I here today? Well, I'm a security researcher and co-founder of Detectify. And as you mentioned, I do quite a bit of bug bounty, which kind of correlates to how we do things in Detectify. So I suppose that's why I'm here.
But you have been interested or in security for quite some time already.
Yeah. So it started already in high school, I suppose, when I met my fellow co-founders of Detectify. By that point, we realized that, well, internet is quite broken. This was back in 2006 when we first met. So by 2008, we decided to start a consultancy business doing penetration testing. But one thing led to another, and we started to automate things. And this idea kind of grew. So we all went to university and dropped out, one after another. And by this point, well, some ideas started to stick, like crawling is pretty good to find URLs on a website. And if you have query parameters in URLs, then you can start looking for SQL injections. And cloud started becoming a buzzword around here in Sweden. So we figured, why not make a new company doing something else?
Yeah, that's cool. So when you first got into security back in like 2000, was it 8?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so
mid 2000.
Yeah. Was there a lot of like, well, I suppose that the world was quite different at the time.
That's right.
And we have taken like quite huge strides when it comes to security in this just past few years as well.
Yeah.
So how do you feel that automation, for example, played into this?
I mean, for example, you can say that some vulnerabilities come and go. SQL injection was a lot more out there a couple of years ago, but now it's mostly been abstracted away by different frameworks and so forth. But at the same time, you now have like server-side template injections. It's basically the same kind of injection attacks. They come and go, but in different forms over the years.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's more things now that out on the internet, more services, more technologies in general that speak web than it was back then. Yeah, so I don't know what to say. Yeah. It's more things, hence more things can break, but the same kind of vulnerabilities that existed back then, it's not as common nowadays, with the exception of XSS.
Yeah. Yeah, so it has really evolved, and the hacks in general. And as I mentioned before, the Tesla hack, for example, is that that was a cross-site scripting attack, right?
Right. So Tesla was, I don't know if they still are, but they were running Drupal, one of the biggest CMS systems. And Drupal, they bundle with this what you see, what you get kind of editor called CK editor. And this library, it bundles with an example file. So using this example file, you could do a kind of drag and drop XSS where, well, it takes a few clicks for an outsider, but you can drag something that looks okay on one website and to some other place, and it will execute in Tesla's origin, and then you have cross-site scripting. So what I demonstrated then was, well, you can play Doom on Tesla. So it replaced the entire window with the game Doom in DOSBox, virtualized in JavaScript.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds like fun. Couldn't play Doom anywhere else.
Yes, I packed away this payload because I thought it was fun, so I use it every now and then in various cross-site scripting demonstrations.
Yeah, but that's a fun way to demonstrate it. But also a bigger one, I would say, vulnerability that you found previously. This was back in 2014. You found a XXE vulnerability in Google. So that's external entity. What is it short for?
Yeah, XML external entity.
XML and external entity, injection. So basically you were able to run your own code on Google server. So do you want to elaborate what that means in this case?
All right, so this was Matthias Karlsson and I. Matthias is early co-founder of Detectify. We were not that tight on cash by that point. This was I think it was late spring. And we figured bug bounty, this actually works. We get some money from this. So what's the most bang for the buck? What companies are out there that we get most money for least amount of effort? And then we thought, Facebook or Google? And we were like, Facebook, that's not very fun to target, to approach. So we went for Google. And then we found, our approach was really like, we should find the very newest features and products, or go for the really old legacy stuff that they might have forgotten. So using Google search itself, we found a feature from, earlier than that, 2008 or something, called the Google Toolbar Button Gallery. So if you remember this, way back in Internet Explorer, you had this toolbar from Google.
Yeah, I remember,
Yeah, so it turns out companies could upload their own buttons to this toolbar. And that was the feature we attacked.
Okay.
So, and this was an XML file you uploaded to Google.
So which button in that?
Yeah, so I can't remember the details per se, but you as a website owner could add your own button to the toolbar so that other users could find you. Something along those lines.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and this button definition was an XML file. And XML is quite funky. You can do a lot of weird things in a plain vanilla XML file. One of them being external entities. So what we did was we uploaded a file. We gave it some name and description and things. But we added this weird kind of, I don't know what to say, a definition that instructed Google to try to read another file from their local file system. So we tried to pull in etc passvd, the normal user file on Unix systems. And we uploaded it, and it worked. It was accepted. We're like, okay, did anything actually happen? So you basically got an, okay, it's uploaded, and then nothing else, like, all right, so now what do we do with this? So then we made another attempt where we changed the title, because you could search on Google for other buttons. So the title contained some text like hello world. Yeah. And then we searched on Google for toolbar buttons containing hello world. And the description then contained the contents of their passvd file. Yeah.
Oh, so you basically search for
so we searched our own thing that we just uploaded.
Okay, so that's kind of like local file inclusion.
Yeah, that's basically the impact. So we got read access on www.google.com.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds quite wild, and also an interesting feature that was there back then by Google.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So this was quite fun. So from start to stop, it took us like 4 hours to identify this and exploit it and have it reported.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, if you're interested to hear more about this Google XXE, There's a blog post about it, and I will link it in the description, so you will find it there. But the interesting thing is that, well, were these all like basically bug bounty programs, or like were they public programs that you enrolled in, or how did you stumble across these?
Right, so this was about the time that we actually founded Detectify. And bug bounty started becoming something you spoke about on Twitter. So Google, in my world, that's the first company I saw that had this kind of policy, meaning anyone can hack Google if they manage, and Google accept it as a new unique vulnerability. You get money for it, and afterward you can speak about it. So this is pretty nice if you're an early stage startup and you want some material to be seen and heard.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's how it went, and this has been growing ever since.
Yeah. How do you feel that people, especially back in the day, if you publicly spoke about, hacking Google or hacking Tesla, like 2014, 2013, how did people react to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It varies. People in the valley, they know about this. That's kind of where it started, this entire industry. But over here in Sweden, it was unheard of that this was even a possibility. So a friend's friend of mine happens to work in the Swedish police. And I was telling him like, oh yeah, I was in Singapore and I hacked the Dropbox. And it was like, what? You can't do that? That's criminal. I was like, no, you missed the point. I have to elaborate a bit on what it is and so forth.
So the point is that it's not criminal, and I don't have to go to jail. Please don't arrest me. When was this?
This was just, I think, 1.5 years ago.
Really? So
yes, so it was quite recent, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Was it even that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Not too far ago.
Yeah. But people still, like, to these days, maybe not, like, I think in our bubble of InfoSec, everyone knows what a bug bounty is or what a responsible disclosure is. But maybe out there, like outside of this immediate bubble of people, it is not that obvious what it is. So can you tell me what is your short description of bug bounties?
So bug bounty is really, it's freelanced penetration testing in a way. So anyone on the internet can go to a company, find a vulnerability, and have a streamlined process of reporting it to the company. And well, if it's a unique vulnerability and you're the first one to submit it, then you get some monetary reward at the end. And that's kind of how it started. And since then, there have come up some platforms and marketplaces to facilitate this among vendors and researchers, like, BugCrowd and HackerOne and Synac and so forth.
Yeah, so basically for bug bounties, you can have a standalone bug bounty on your own company website, for example, offering reward in exchange of, or swag or something, in exchange of a vulnerability.
Right.
Or you have these platforms, as you mentioned, HackerOne, BugCrowd, Synac, then there's like Bounty Factory, Open Bug Bounty, Hacks Trophy, and like a lot of like different kind of platforms who more or less operate the same, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, as you said, that your friend or your friend's friend who thought that you were an absolute criminal, how these bug bounties have basically lifted hackers out of the darkness as well, and now hackers can actually talk about what they have found, and they can disclose it, and like it naturally depending on the program and the rules on that, but it's also shedding a more positive light on hackers as a group of people.
Yeah, indeed. But I think it's quite important to speak a bit about responsible disclosure programs as well. That's basically the first stepping stone in order to do something like this. It's just to have an email address or a contact form where someone can submit vulnerability information. That's all it takes. More often than not, you know it yourself. There are vulnerabilities all over the place, but it's can be quite tricky to report it.
Yeah, you don't always have to offer swag or money.
No, exactly, just have a channel to accept it.
Yeah, so there is, for example, the practice of putting a security.txt file in your domain so that people know, like you put contact information of your security personnel there, or then you can put info on your just company website.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Do you think that, like, what would be the minimum thing that a company should do in terms of?
I think security TXT is a very good starting point. Have that and set up a security@company.com email.
Yeah.
That's it really.
Yeah.
That's a good starting point.
Yeah. So you don't need to go on HackerOne and open bug bounty program there.
No, I think that should come a bit later once you have matured your so you know what you get basically.
Yeah.
It can be quite overwhelming, I would assume, if you go directly to one of these platforms, open a bug bounty publicly to the world.
Yeah.
And everyone will start reporting straight away.
Yeah. So do you think that there's like, there's the open programs or the public programs, and then there's the private programs. But do you think that a company who enlists in a public program will get tons and tons of reports right from the get-go?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
More in the beginning, and then it should probably slow down.
Yeah. So it would make sense then to do some kind of security assessment before that.
Yes, I think you should only start with responsible disclosure once you have had your pen test reports, some automated scanning, and you should have an organization that is able to handle security reports.
Yeah.
Only then do something like responsible disclosure or a private bug bounty program, and only after that make it public.
Yeah. Let's say that you are relatively mature in terms of security as a company. Do you feel that bug bounty platforms, or not even platforms, but bug bounties are for all of the companies out there?
Yeah, I think so. As long as you have some kind of online presence, it would be hard otherwise. Then again, if you are a manufacturer of hardware, for example, it's becoming quite, or I don't know, it's growing at least, but IoT vendors, for example, open up and have bug bounty programs and so forth as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it has to be something technical. It's quite hard to have a bug bounty otherwise.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of something that would be so, that wouldn't have an online presence these days. Like you would have...
But everything have, right?
Yeah, everything has at least like a company website, if nothing else.
Exactly. You always have something that's important to your business.
Yeah.
And you can probably make a bounty program around that. What are you trying to protect?
Yeah.
Say you are Dropbox, the most sensitive things would be your users and their files, right? If you're Apple, well, it's basically everything. That's a bad example, I guess.
Yeah.
A bank, probably the money.
Yeah, and just the online banking and everything. Yeah.
So then it doesn't really matter if it's, say, a website or that one domain. That's the scope for your program. Yeah. But you should really try to think about this. What am I trying to protect? And then make your policy thereafter. Yeah.
So you mentioned just a scope. So a scope in a bug bounty program is defined by the company, and they are basically stating that, okay, this is basically in scope of the program. So it can be a domain or source code or some device. Or
it can. It's usually along those lines. One or several domain names, can be mobile apps, GitHub repositories. If it's a hardware manufacturer, it could be their devices they sell to consumers, for example. There's a lot of blockchain companies out there, then it would be attacking the blockchain technology itself.
Yeah. What do you feel is the best scope for you as a tester?
For me, privately, the bigger scopes, the better. So it's quite... being a security researcher, you have a bit of an arbitrage. The more things that are exposed and that you can, audit, the more things will break. As simple as that. So the bigger company, the easier it is.
Yeah.
In my opinion, at least. So more or a bigger scope means more critical vulnerabilities, and that's more business impact. So it will help you as a company even more.
So what happens if you go outside of a scope in a bug bounty program?
That really depends on the organization. I mean, what really matters if you have a bug bounty program is the business impact that an outsider can have, right?
Yeah.
So unless something is explicitly out of scope, it could be fine to report a vulnerability if it really have impact.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. Although that could also be considered scope creeping, if you are on one of these.
What was the word?
Scope creeping.
Scope creeping. What does that mean?
I mean, you kind of, you go a bit out of scope and in again.
Okay, so.
Yeah, exactly. More often than not, that's usually more accepted on these live hacking events. So if one of these platforms, they collect a group of people in person to hack a company over a day or two, then it's usually more accepted than if you are to do it like right now.
Yeah.
You find something on, I don't know, Adobe, and you go outside to some local subsidiary or something and then back into scope.
Yeah.
That's not usually that's good.
Maybe live hacking events, the overall environment, it's more easier to control and have inside.
Then you have all the stakeholders at one place.
Yeah.
They can communicate about it.
Do you feel that some security researchers, for example, do not report something if it's out of scope, and if it's not that critical, for example?
100%. I really believe so. So open redirects, for example, it's no longer on the OWASP top 10.
Yeah.
But having an open redirect somewhere on some subdomain that might be explicitly out of scope, and you know it's there, then I at least wouldn't report it.
Yeah.
With the risk of losing signal or reputation or whatnot on one of these platforms.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they have OAuth and it's misconfigured, I can use it to, do, some kind of authentication bypass or steal some sensitive tokens.
Yeah.
That's a different story. Then all of a sudden, you go out of scope, only to go in again, and you might have an account takeover.
Yeah.
And that would be usually considered critical.
Yeah.
And that companies would accept.
Yeah, so it really depends on the impact as well.
Yeah.
Like if you can demonstrate the impact. And I
think
exactly.
That's I think that's the moral of the story.
Yeah.
It's the impact that matters.
Yeah. And in bug bounties, it's always the
you need a proof of concept.
Yeah,
otherwise
right.
It's kind of void report.
Yeah, because I used to work as a pen tester, so for a pen tester you have such limited time as well.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily always have to provide with a proof of concept, and also pen testers, maybe they look at it from a kind of wider angle and they can like see it white box and like see like the infrastructure and the servers and so on. So it's interesting like how I would say impact driven bug bounty community is.
Yeah, it really
which
is.
It's a good thing naturally as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of bug bounties, it is a big industry, like in terms of the platforms and everything, but it has also gotten some criticism or scrutiny over how many active researchers there actually is. So there's a lot of people who sign up to, for example, HackerOne, but never submit a report, for example. So I found this, this was written in dark reading by Robert Lemo? I don't know, maybe butchered the name there. But back in 2019, in August, he wrote how the bug bounty how bug bounties continue to rise, but market has its own 1% problem. So he's basically stating that the more than 500,000 hackers have signed up for HackerOne Managed Challenge, but only 5,000 are really doing well. And this was actually a quote from Martin Mikos, who is the CEO of HackerOne. So it is quite a well-known fact that a lot of people sign up to these platforms and try them out, but don't necessarily get any money out of it, right?
Yeah, that I believe is true.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I think it's a lot of these bug bounty hunters. They get a lot of coverage in like Twitter or in media, but it's kind of like the same as being a professional in anything, like a professional basketball player. And I think that was also something that was said here in Robert Lemos's article. That was most likely a quote from Martin Mikos, that not everyone is gonna succeed, and then there's the people who succeed and then are really, really good at what they do.
Right. I don't know what to add to that. I think it's true. A lot of people are drawn into they see on Twitter and in media that this is growing, this is a thing. People go around on these live events, and it's an open environment, and everyone always finds something critical, which is true. But to get there, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
So I think a vast majority might not have a professional take on how to report vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And then it might be people like yourself coming from a pen testing background. You submit.
And having all of them rejected.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? So if you go in with the mindset of a pen tester, then I don't think you will do very good. It will probably be a bit discouraging.
Yeah.
And only once you get the grasp of this, then you need to beat the rest that are in the game. So I think it could be quite a steep curve to get into, actually getting some vulnerabilities in and have them accepted.
Yeah, and having to compete with like people like you who have been around from 2013, for example, on HackerOne and like on other platforms as well. So it's kind of like you are well ahead of people who are already starting out now, or only starting out now. And even though there is a way of making money out of these platforms, even though you've started just now, but it's still like I think it needs kind of like, it's a good to remind people that don't be disheartened when you try out bug bounties.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. I mean, learning by doing. Submit reports and see how it works and when it works.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good resources out there.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of streamers now coming up that speak about how to do bug bounty and educate people and what to look for.
Yeah. Do you have any specific recommendations for our listeners of the resources that they should go for?
I'm going to be a bit biased here. I'm going to recommend our fellow coworker, Tom.
Yeah.
Tomnomnom.
Yeah.
And also Stök, Swedish researcher.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like their streams. They're good.
Yeah. I'm going to add links to their material in the description. So if you want to look it up, then you can after the show, or even right now if you want to. We have had now quite a long discussion what bug bounties are and what they are good for and how companies should basically think of them. So do you have something in mind that would be something that bug bounties are not really good for?
Not good for. I mean, we kind of touched upon it. It's not a silver bullet to your security.
Yeah.
It's a nice addition to an already quite mature organization in terms of security. I mean, it's the many eyes principle. More people looking and trying to break something, someone will eventually be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what bug bounty really brings to the table.
Yeah.
If you start a bit premature with doing bug bounties as a company, chances are that it will be a bad experience for researchers. It sucks for me, for example, if I am to report a vulnerability and it gets flagged as a duplicate.
Yeah.
Chances are I'm not the first one to be flagged as a duplicate.
Yeah. Or if the companies are slow to respond, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it must be horrible for the company as well. They get the overwhelming amount of reports as they can't act on it fast enough.
Yeah.
So then it's not nice for anyone.
Yeah.
So I think you should be a bit careful with that.
Yeah.
Start with private and then slightly expand the scope and amount of people that participate in your program.
Yeah.
and have it as an addition.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's basically, to put it in other words as well, it's good way of getting rid of those absolute like low-hanging fruits and understanding what you're exposing there and
Now on the contrary, I believe the bug bounty community, they will find all of it. I mean, they will find your XSSs.
Yeah.
If you can't fix the XSS fast enough,
yeah.
then you will have a problem. Then
You will have multiple reports of those
Yes,
same
you will.
XSSs.
Yeah. And the best researchers, they tend to go for more creative vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
You know, hard to find things deep down in your system.
Yeah.
And that's where you want them to be looking.
Yeah.
I mean,
do you think that all companies get equal treatment from bug bounty hunters as well?
No, I don't think so. It's absolutely a monetary interest.
Yeah.
There are more and more companies joining these platforms. And I mean, there's only that many researchers that provide value.
Yeah.
So then you have to compete somehow to have researchers look at your stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there are various ways you can have like campaigns. From over this 2 weeks, you pay more money, for example, or you send away a T-shirt if for any accepted report. Like you do a bit of gamification.
Yeah.
That usually brings attention.
Yeah, and I think some bug bounty hunters are there. They're just like, it's not their livelihood and it's more like a hobby. So they are up for a challenge either way.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I think we had multiple takeaways for our listeners in this episode already. But do you have any like one big takeaway that our listeners could take with them after this episode?
One big, I don't know. If you're a company, start small, expand. Researchers love big scopes. So try to reach that eventually. If you're starting off doing bug bounty, don't give up too soon. It takes time and practice to get into this, but it's not impossible. Anyone can do it, really. Yeah. It's just problem solving.
Yeah, that's nice. And yeah, to all listeners out there, don't be disheartened and keep going on with your bug bounty adventures. Thank you for listening to our episode, and feel free to drop us any ideas, questions, or thoughts at Detectify Twitter account or undetected at detectify.com email. Thank you for tuning in and catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.